Hey folks, Ritchie here, and I have something really exciting to show you today. So if you're anything like me, you were doing brew in the bag, in your kitchen, on the stove, getting great results, winning some competitions, etc. But you get the itch, and that itch is to go bigger and badder. What do you do when you get that itch? Well, what I did over the last couple months is I put together a really big brew in the bag system. I'm calling it the Mega BIAB system. And my new setup, it lets me brew about 24 finished gallons in my garage. And you're probably asking yourself, well, why in the heck did he do that? Why didn't he go with a 3-vessel system like I see in professional breweries or various pictures? And I'll tell you why. One is because you can save a lot of money doing brew in the bag. You only need a single vessel. Compare that to 3 vessels, 3 kettles, 3 burners, pumps, all sorts of other stuff. The other thing is that brew in the bag, it's simple and you get really good results. So I put together this big system. I've started having friends coming over, brewing with me. I've been having a great time. The other night, we did a Belgian wit beer. I took some video of that and some pictures. And what I'm going to show you is a little walkthrough of the setup and that brew night. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you want to see any other videos. And don't forget, you don't need to be a hipster, you don't need $1 million, and you don't even need a beard to brew good beer, world-class beer. However, the beard does help. All right, folks, till next time.
All right, the first thing we come across here is the Hydra immersion chiller. And I got this instead of a plate chiller because I really didn't want to have to worry about things like pumps or sanitizing the inside of a plate chiller and so on. I want it to be really easy, I want it to be fairly quick, and something that I could clean off extremely easily too when we were done brewing. And this Hydra, it works great. We're able to pretty much chill a 3/4 barrel batch in, anywhere from, I guess, 5 minutes to 15 minutes, and it kind of depends on which hose we're using. Sometimes we're using a much longer 50-foot hose just because we need to stretch all the way into the garage. Other times we're able to use a 10-foot hose if we're doing things outside right next to the hose outlet on the house. So this works great. It's interesting because the design of it, you pretty much, you have your hose coming down one of those inlets there, and you can see that the tubing, the copper tubing, splits to 3. And it's essentially kind of like having 3 different chillers in one. The unit's fairly heavy, but again, it works well. And what we often do is we'll have one guy with some gloves on, and he's usually raising the chiller up and down in the boil kettle, and we might have another guy also stirring, ideally. And those two things together really can speed up the chilling process. All right, enough about chilling. Let's move on here. So coming up on your right is a big bucket filled with star sand, and that's extremely handy. You can easily just dip, a mash paddle in there. You can keep stuff in there and keep it sanitized. You can dip a spoon in there if you need to take a little sample of beer, etc. The spigot on the bottom is also really handy because you can fill up like a carboy or something like that really easily. Next to the bucket, there's some gloves, and those can come in real handy if you want to, say, squeeze the bag when you're doing the brew in the bag technique. And up above that, there's a funnel and some different spoons and strainers. And the strainers come in handy along with a funnel when we are basically splitting out the finished wort into multiple fermenters. We just run it right through those strainers into the funnel, into the fermenter, and that way we keep a lot of trub and various junk and stuff like that out of our fermenters. Not that there's a huge issue with it, but it just takes up extra space in the fermenter. Moving on, we have a nice wooden mash paddle, and we have a digital thermometer. There's a refractometer there in that case. We can easily take measurements of our gravity throughout the process. There's a lighter, scissors, various beers that we had out and we're sharing. There is a mortar and pestle. This brew was a wit beer, so we were grinding up some different spice. There's some Poland Spring there, and there was more on the floor. And for this brew, what we did is we basically split the water between Poland Spring and town water that was run through a carbon filter, which I'll show you later. And then over to the left of that, up at the top, there's the brew bag in its plastic package, and then a whole bunch of other stuff inside of those bins, a variety of useful tools and things. All right, moving on. Let's slow this video down a little bit. All right, so right there we have a propane tank, and it's hooked up to a Brew-built afterburner, which works really well. I mean, it can way overboil that 30-gallon Spike brewing kettle, which I love, by the way. And then right behind that is a big ladder. And the great thing about using a ladder for these big brew-in-the-bag brews is that the ladder is useful for home, and it's also useful for brewing. So if you're married, you can tell your spouse that. Now up there's a big board, and it has an eyelet that can hold like 250 pounds. And then there is a pulley set up, hooked to that. The pulley is fairly cheap, I think around $20 or so. And I believe that one halves the weight of whatever is on the end of the pulley. So if you're, hoisting, let's just say 50 pounds of grain for a batch like this, you have, I don't know, maybe 30 pounds of water absorbed in there. So a total of like 80 pounds. And when you go to lift up the bag, it's a little closer to, lifting 40 pounds. But it still can be somewhat tough, I'm not going to lie to you. And then inside the kettle, you can see that we were about to mash in with 21 gallons of water. You can see a little bit of the Reflectix material that I use to insulate the kettle. I have a big piece of Reflectix that goes around the kettle to help insulate the entire thing once the mash is in there. That's kind of it for that setup. There is the carbon filter that I use for the town water. And I'll tell you what, it sure does make a difference. What you need to do with this, though, is you have to get it so it's running like 1 gallon per minute or less for the flow. So it takes a while to fill up a big kettle, but it's really not a big deal if you get it running ahead of time. Now here's the afterburner running, and you can see the flames going on that thing, and we could tweak that up quite a bit more if we wanted to. Once we got that water up to temperature, I think 164 degrees in this case, we started to mash in. And we were mashing in around 55 pounds of grain, and we had a lot of flake grain in this mash bill. And we ended up at a saccharification rest of 152. All right, and now we get to the fun stuff, hoisting the bag. So pretty much you take that rope, you pull on it, you get the bag up in the air, and you can do some sparging, you can squeeze the bag, and so on. And what I like to do is get the rope to whoever the biggest guy is that's brewing with us that day. Hoist that thing right up, and you're ready to rock. And here we are squeezing the bag, getting some more of the sugars out of it. Once that's done, we start to heat up the mash and try to get things to a boil. Take a little bit of time. Whoa, that was quick. We're already at a boil. It was only like, what, 1 or 2 seconds? Hey-o. And now, how about a little montage of us stirring in some spices? We got coriander there. We have a variety of different interesting citrus fruit zests in there. There's some chamomile. Looking good. Next, let's chill that beer down.
The trick is coordinating my bounce with your cycle on the swirl.
I think we got it.
There we go.
Here we open the ball valve, and we're starting to fill up the first carboy. We got about 22, 23 gallons out of this batch. So we split to 4 different carboys. And next you're going to see us basically squeezing every little bit of wort out of that kettle. We just picked it up and poured it right through that strainer.
Which one we got in there?
There's probably it on fluid that was in the strainer now.
There's more. No, you got about half gallon there.
And there's my carboy about 12 hours later. in my temperature controlled fermentation chamber. I have a blow-off tube hooked up, and you can see the fermentation is really picking up and looking nice.